Each spiritual father has shone on the firmament of Christ's church through certain virtues, yet each stands out in a personal, unique way, for one star differs from another star in glory. Father Justin also shone in a special way, making him unique among the great spiritual fathers. A holy life, a spiritual force, an undeniable moral and spiritual authority, an unshakable landmark amidst the turbulence of today's world, a national conscience ever awake and alive, a trumpet that awakened souls and changed human destinies, a man with spiritual insight into the depths of the human soul, an authentic confessor of the true faith through both word and deed, a voice that was at once uncomfortable and critical of failures, yet also a source of comfort for those seeking to rise again, a true synthesis of a nation's spirit and thought, a flame ever burning with the love of Christ. This is the image of Father Justin. He lived always among the people, deeply embedded in their struggles, and now, beyond this world, he carries them all in his soul, vast as the bosom of Abraham. What was the inner force that lifted Abba Justin to such a height of spiritual perfection, so that those who crossed the threshold of his cell or merely looked upon him felt the breath of the Holy Spirit within him, an encounter that brought about transfiguration through conversion and an awareness of God's work through his saints? As he himself testified, the key factors that shaped him were his mother and the family he came from, the priest and the parish community of his native village, Petru, the Durău monastery and the monastic community where he took his vows, as well as the 8 years of monastic seminary he attended. However, the most decisive influence, surpassing all other forms of spiritual edification, was undoubtedly the prison, the 16 years of detention that he endured from May 14, 1948, until the spring of 1964. Here, Father Justin, alongside many young people, students and intellectuals, suffered the horrors of a regime of torture, terror, dehumanization, humiliation, starvation, isolation, and unimaginable torment. Like the martyrs of old, these prisoners found survival through their faith in God, expressed in every possible way: prayer, fasting, religious services performed under extreme conditions, biblical readings, spiritual conversations, human solidarity with fellow sufferers, patience, courage, dignity. At the same time, they resisted through culture, sharing their knowledge with one another, so that, by the end of their imprisonment, each of them had become a true living encyclopedia. Thus, for Father Justin and all his comrades, prison was a true school, a veritable university, where they acquired more knowledge than could ever be gained in any prestigious educational institution, knowledge not validated by diplomas, but by life itself. When asked in the 1970s why he did not pursue a theology degree, since at that time several monastic fathers were allowed to enroll as theology students, he replied, "I have a university greater than all universities. My university was prison. What I learned there is not taught in any college." At the same time, the communist prisons became, for this great spiritual father, a place where he practiced authentic monastic life. A monk by vocation, having entered monasticism at a young age at Durău Monastery, with 10 years of monastic experience and 8 years spent in the strict discipline of monastic seminaries, he would later confess that true monasticism was something he truly lived in prison. Together with all those behind bars, he cultivated the virtues of spiritual ascent to their highest intensity. In prison, we were deprived of our Christian rights, but we gained the paradise within. From his own testimonies, It is understood that the defining state of this period of detention was suffering, which all prisoners accepted as a sacrifice offered to the Lamb slain for the salvation of the world, just like the martyrs of old, brought as lambs to the slaughter. In prison I came to know humiliation, true humility, and detachment from the body, something you attain only when you realize that there is no longer any hope of salvation. Day by day, you saw your life coming to an end and the moment of death drawing near. The suffering he endured transfigured him in such a way that he would later confess, "For me, the cell became the tomb of the resurrection and the radiance of divine grace." While behind bars, he made a vow before God that if he were to regain his freedom, he would dedicate himself to alleviating all human suffering. Father Justin fulfilled this promise abundantly until his last breath, relieving people of their burdens and taking them upon himself. In prison, he witnessed the martyrdom of many of his comrades. Some died in his arms, others he confessed and gave Holy Communion to. He even celebrated the divine liturgy on the body of a dying man, using him as a sacred antimis, an altar cloth containing relics. He knew of their sanctity, sealed through their ultimate sacrifice. He also saw how their humiliation continued even after death, as their bodies were thrown into the prisoners' ravine at Aiud or into mass graves at Periprava and other detention sites, without crosses at their heads, without a Christian funeral, without the tears and lamentations of their loved ones. After his release in 1964, Father Justin remained deeply connected in heart and mind to these confessors of faith in God. He kept their memory alive through prayer and spoke of their martyrdom only in small trusted circles, as he was closely watched by the authorities. He was firmly convinced of their holiness, believing that they formed the most glorious and beautiful crown to adorn our country before God. At the same time, he was deeply concerned about the attitude of the atheist state, which sought to cast a veil of oblivion over the martyr's sacrifice and to educate the new generation in a different spirit with different ideals. After the 1989 regime change, Father Justin became the pioneer of the fight to revive the memory of those who perished in prison. This mission took shape through several initiatives. Immediately after the fall of communism, he visited Aiud and other prisons, telling the guard who tried to stop him at the entrance, "This is my home." He began sharing his stories and giving interviews about prison life, drawing attention to the greatness of the sacrifice made by a generation that did not pursue political goals, but only sought to uplift the nation along the path of the Church. He encouraged many to write memoirs about life in prison, so much so that many of the existing works on this subject have Father Justin as their moral inspiration. He initiated, coordinated, and closely oversaw the creation of monuments, crosses, memorials, and monasteries in sacred places, true Golgothas of the Romanian people, such as Aiud, Sighet, and the monastery dedicated to those who perished at the Poarta Albă labor camp along the Danube-Black Sea Canal. He organized pilgrimages and memorial services for those who suffered in prisons or at their burial sites across the country. During a pilgrimage to Aiud, standing among the shelves holding the relics of the martyrs, he said, "The only thing I regret is that I did not die here as well, so that I could be with them on the other side," fully convinced of their holiness. He took the initiative to promote the veneration of the saints of the prisons by publishing their lives, hymns, acatis, and icons, some of which are deeply moving due to their symbolism and message, as well as by placing their relics for veneration. All of these efforts served as preliminary steps toward their official canonization. He firmly supported the recognition of May 14th as a day of remembrance for the saints of the prisons. This date marks the nationwide enforcement of Order No. 5 issued by the Ministry of Internal Affairs, which called for the arrest of all so-called reactionary and hostile elements. On the night of May 14th, 10,000 young people, students and intellectuals were arrested. Father Justin, who was also arrested that night, referred to it as a St. Bartholomew's night, the most odious and criminal night in Romania's political and social history. The pinnacle of Father Justin's work regarding the saints of the prisons was his persistent proposal and plea for their canonization. He repeatedly stated, "I have one more concern, to see these saints canonized. Silence is the grave we are digging for our nation." Canonization was not for the benefit of these confessors, but for the entire people and for present and future generations, so they could identify with their dignity and steadfast faith. Father Justin was metaphorically called the voivode of Romanian Orthodoxy. A voivode leads an entire nation, from the highest to the lowest, from the ruler to the servant. The power to awaken and lead is even greater now that he resides in the glory of the Most Holy Trinity.